Hello, Internet. My name is Brett. This is my channel. I talk every week on YouTube, and you might be seeing me this week on Facebook and Periscope. So thank you all for those that are attending from there. But this is really a YouTube live show. I have guests every week. Not every week, that's a lie. I have guests some weeks. And this week, it's just me and my shell. So my shell is my guest, my terminal emulator with a shell inside it to be technically correct. And what I want to talk about, and I'm going to demo, is basically we're going to have a lot of fun today. So if you're, oh, and there goes my headphones. By the way, Apple AirPods don't stay in your ears. So if you're someone who ever uses a terminal, then this show is for you. Basically, I've got a Mac, a Linux, and a Windows 10 machine, as well as a remote Linux machine, all sitting here ready to go. And we're going to go through basically my setup, like what is my preferred everything. And this could take more than an hour. So I'm going to answer your questions when you ask them. Otherwise, I'm going to be rolling through basically setting up multiple machines with how I like them set up. And that obviously is a lot of work, right? There's lots of little steps. So the guide for all this, at least the guide I have currently, is something I'm going to put into chat. Let's see. New background for future episodes. Maybe. I have a couple of new ones, so I thought I'd try this one out. Have you tried Windows Terminal? Yes, Windows Terminal. We'll talk about that, and that is my default terminal emulator on Windows 10 for sure. It is great. All right, so this is the shell. This link, let me put it up on the screen here. All right, so this is my blog post. I put it into chat, and this is actually at least 3 years old, and I haven't changed much. I kind of got stuck in my ways. I did have to update a few things. I did actually replace Commander on Windows CMDER, which is basically Commander is a distribution, I guess, of conemu, which was a command prompt replacement. And now Windows Terminal is the way to go. So that's the official Windows Terminal from Microsoft. And there's the way to install that is through the Windows Store. But we're going to get into all that in a minute. First, I want to back up. And I want to start at the top, right? So when we just start talking about this stuff, let's make sure that we understand the two definitions here. That there's a terminal emulator on your computer. If you're on Mac, it's called terminal. If you're on a Linux desktop, that has various names coming with the default, but it's some sort of thing that's called terminal. And then on Windows, that is the command prompt. Or actually, it's technically cmd.exe. So this is the GUI that provides terminal emulation so that you can run a shell. A shell is something like Bash, ZSH, even the default DOS emulator command prompt inside of Windows, or PowerShell. Those are all shells, and those can often be run in different windows or different terminal emulators. So the first question on your list is, what should be my default terminal emulator? The GUI that I launch, unless you're on a Linux server with SSH, and then there is no terminal emulator, there's no GUI. Technically, at that point, SSH is technically the terminal emulator. And you can see a gigantic list of those over on Wikipedia. I'm not sure if it's actually complete. I didn't validate that every one of these was in the list, but this is a pretty gigantic list of graphical interfaces that give you terminal emulation. Back in the day, if you're an old nerd like me, you actually had to care whether or not it supported VT100 or Xterm or various standards in the industry for green screen, or does it support color? Those are all things we had to care about. Basically, nowadays, it all just works, and in most cases. Some issues still arise when you're using less common terminal emulators. So one of my requirements for a terminal emulator is that it supports things like Vim or other pseudo-graphical interfaces inside of my terminal emulator, which is why on my list, you don't see all sorts of, especially up here. So this is a very short list. I basically have 1, maybe 2 per OS. On Linux, it's Tilix. So there's Terminator, which is another one. I think I actually have that up here. Terminator is another popular one, but I tend to like Tilix more. We'll get into that and why that is. But I use the ones with the broadest support and that are the fastest. I don't tend to use the ones that have all the whiz-bang new features. And there's some out there that you'll notice that are on the internet, and I'm not going to bash any because obviously everybody's trying to make the best terminal emulator, but there's a lot of ones out there that are based on JavaScript shells, graphical interfaces, and those tend to get really wonky really fast, especially when you're doing things like SSH or Vim or NeoVim or something like that inside of your terminal emulator. Those things tend to break. So I only need at most 2 terminal emulators on my machine, so I don't tend to keep them all. All right. Let's look at the questions here real quick. Thanks, Charlie. An inexpensive replacement for AirPods. Well, I just bought the AirPod Pros, so I'm probably... I have a house of headphones. Let me tell you. I've got these fancy things for my Xbox, which are huge. I've got special ones just for my iPad because I need USB-C on my iPad. I have wired ones. I have wireless ones. I just have a ton. So, yeah, thanks for the tip. I will check out those. I wish I could have 1 pair of headphones that work in every occasion, but that's not going to happen. Let's see. I have an issue with Elasticsearch cluster in Docker swarm mode when I use health check containers cannot resolve service names. Without health check, all is fine. I don't know. I've never heard of that issue. I don't have an idea of why that would be the case. So, my recommendation is to try in the Swarm channel of the Docker community Slack, or maybe in the forums.docker.com. I'm not sure. That's a really odd issue. Not heard of that one. All right. What is Screen or tmux then? So Screen and tmux could also be considered a terminal emulator. It is not a shell because those have to execute something inside them like bash or zsh. So those are I prefer tmux. So essentially the job of Screen or tmux, they do the same thing, but tmux has way more features. So tmux is something that runs inside a terminal emulator, like either inside of SSH or inside of your local terminal emulator, like Terminal or iTerm or Windows Console or whatever, Windows Terminal. And the idea is that it stays running in the background as a daemon to keep your shells running when your GUI is closed. So if you have never checked these things out, they're really useful if you have a complex setup and you want to close down your applications. Maybe you're afraid that your terminal emulator will crash and you don't want all your shell setup to go away. I also use something like tmux when I am SSHing into a server and I want to keep my whole setup on that server. So for example, if I were to SSH, I always get the new version prompts right when I'm going live. Okay. So if I SSH into a Unix machine, or a Linux machine rather, so if I do that, and then let's see if I have a tmux there. I might have a tmux. Yeah, so see, when I typed tmux there, it instantly brought me into my Vim that was exactly set up from my previous time shelling into that server. And so tmux is a really handy tool for remote stuff. I use it mostly now just for remote. I don't use it locally, but a lot of people do. A lot of people use it because their terminal emulator doesn't have a bunch of features around window panes or tabs. So for example, in my terminal emulator GUI here, I can have tabs, right? I can have different windows. So I can have two shells running side by side. I can have a shell running on top of the other one. I can have all these sort of nested shells in there. That's the job of my terminal emulator. But tmux is playing that job for me as well if I want to, right? So over here on this one, I can switch between these little windows down the bottom. You can actually see them at the bottom of my window, bottom left. That is tmux acting as a sort of pseudo terminal emulator. So you might even say that tmux is a non-graphical terminal emulator because it still requires you to have a GUI running. You have to have something to launch it. And so when I'm on Mac, I have iTerm as my GUI. On Windows, let's just go over to Windows real quick. My Windows machine, I have Windows Terminal. This is the awesome, relatively new Windows Terminal from Microsoft. It's not installed by default. You have to go to the store to get it. And if you just search Windows Terminal, it's, by the way, if you tried it a year or two ago and you found it to be feature incomplete, it's a lot better now. They keep updating it probably every month. And so you can get the terminal emulator in the store for free from Microsoft. It's also available on GitHub, but it's easier just to install it from the store because it'll keep it up to date. You can also install it from the command line with Chocolatey. And so we'll talk about that more, but that gives us all sorts of ways to open up different shells. That's one of the cool things about Windows Terminal is it has this drop-down window for different shells. So I can open up a Bash shell in an Ubuntu VM, or I can run a PowerShell shell, or I can run the standard command prompt DOS emulator shell that you would probably have. And this GUI replaces the cmd.exe that you would normally run on Windows for the last 25 years. So if I just type the cmd.exe and launch that, this is the old thing, right? This is the old thing that we were all used to since Windows 95. And it really hasn't changed much for various reasons. But this is now a superset of the functionality. They're keeping the old one around, by the way, just to ensure backwards compatibility, because like most things, Microsoft, they really focus on backwards compatibility with Windows. So they're not replacing that. They're basically just making you a new one. So throw away that command prompt, use the Windows terminal, you'll be happy. All right. Let's see what else there. Do I have Docker on Xbox? I'd love to. I actually have, now that I think about it, I have an old original Xbox that technically runs an x86 compatible CPU. So we might be able to do that if we could get Linux running on there. But no, I don't have it on Xbox. All right, so how do you manage dot files on Git? So I have my own dot files. It is not public because mine is a mess, and most of the ones out there are great. So in case you're not familiar with dot files, if you just search dot files. So dot files is a way, basically, for all of your command or shell programs. That includes Git, your Vim settings, any of your shell settings like Bash or ZSH or Fish or whatever your shell is. Anything you're running in the shell, anything you're running in there like Git or tmux, you name it. All those things are. Let's see the question we're answering here. Is known as a dot file because those setting files are typically a dot something, right? So there's always the first character is a dot to indicate that it's a setting file, or that it's hidden. Usually it's hidden by default when you do an ls. So that's kind of the thing, is it's hidden because it's really a configuration file. So on GitHub, there's tons of people creating standard dot file setups, which means you can download their dot file directory and apply it to your machine. And it's a super fast way to get started when building out your settings. So it'll typically have default settings for everything from the fonts to the colors and all the things. I have a dot file setting just for my iTerm, which is technically a GUI. I also store, I think, VS Code in there and other stuff. So there's a bunch of tutorials on this. I will throw this in chat. So go check out dot files, make it yours. You can see in my terminal that I have mine. So if I just go into a dot file directory on my machine, right, I have tons of stuff in here. So I keep settings for, I have some custom scripts in there. I have scripts for automatically building out my Mac. Whenever I get a new Mac, I will automatically install a bunch of default things through a shell script. But all of these things were based off of that GitHub repo and all the examples that everyone else gave me. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of, Atom settings for my Atom, Base16, which is an old, Base16 is an old color. I now use Groovebox for color, color settings in my shell, Sublime Text 3, which is another visual editor that I have settings for, Alfred, which is a Mac search utility that gives you a graphical search. So it's not just for command line things, but I tend to keep all this stuff in here. I also have secrets in here, and so I don't make it public because there are sometimes little secrets leak through or keys, API keys, stuff like that. So I try to keep that private. Anyway, I don't have any original ideas here. This is all stolen from the internet off of those GitHub Docker files or dot files, not Docker files. Great question. Let's see. Yeah. So I make a symlink. I actually have a series of symlinks inside of a shell script that set all that up. But I mean, it took me 3 years to make it, and it's highly customized to me. So a lot of times it wouldn't even make sense to someone else, because it's aliases that I prefer, aliases that I set up, stuff like that. Don't put secrets in Git. That's pretty much my advice, which is why it's not public. Why does Microsoft try so hard to be Linux? Because Linux is awesome, and Microsoft wants to support awesome things, I guess. Space Vim. So Space Vim is part of my setup, for sure. It is in my Sweet Shell setup. All right, so let's talk about the stack, right? Your first thing, terminal emulator. We talked about that. Next thing is setting up that terminal emulator. So you usually want to set a default font in your terminal emulator, right? In iTerm, you set that in the settings, and one of the ways you do that is through a nerd font. So we're going to talk about nerd fonts for a second. So nerd fonts, which I'll put in here, is something you should check out later. But later on, we are going to have a lot of things that we do in fonts that we have to have a special shell font for. We're going to have custom settings in Vim. We're going to have a monospaced font that is good for programming, for anything you want to do that's ensuring that each character is the same space, so that way it's easier to read on a screen in terms of development. And the nice thing is that Nerd Fonts is an open source repo that takes all these different programming fonts, then applies a bunch of other things to it, like Font Awesome and other like UI and things that basically you're going to use the font to hack the UI, to make your terminal UI look more advanced and have graphics in it without truly having the like a graphical interface, right? So it's kind of a hack, but it's a really great hack. And I've been using Nerd Fonts, which are patched fonts, meaning they take a standard font and then they add more stuff to it into the font file, and you put that on your machine. So, for example, if we go to my iTerm and we bring up the settings, and this is true on Windows as well as in Linux. We can go through those as well. But once you get into a profile, so in my case, I have my dark profile, and I get into my text, you'll see down here at the bottom, my font is the Deja Vu Sans Mono Nerd font. So it's Deja Vu sans is the font. Mono means it's mono-spaced. And nerd font means that it's the official nerd font from Nerd Fonts that gives me all the extra glyphs and power line and stuff like that that goes inside of my font file. So it's in that true type font on my machine. And then I have to have programs that understand how to handle. Now, I don't use ligatures, in case any of you geeky font people know about ligatures. Ligatures is where you can make a multiple characters like equals equals or equals not equals, like equals bang, something like that. It'll turn it into one character. It's known as ligatures. I don't do them just because I find them confusing, and I've been doing this forever, so I'm not used to ligatures. But it's a pretty cool new thing. This is a little option you see down here at the bottom. It says use ligatures, and that will give you some new special characters inside your fonts for programming, especially things like greater than, less than, equals equals equals, or dash dash dash. We'll actually replace it with a hyphen, stuff like that. That you normally get that stuff in a GUI, like in a regular GUI program, but you don't normally get that in a shell. So ligatures gives you that advanced feature, but your shell, your terminal emulator has to support that, which iTerm does. All right, let's check out some of the questions. So yeah, Space Vim is, we're going to talk about Space Vim later, but basically Space Vim is a distribution of Vim that makes Vim so much easier to use. I'm not talking about logging and all that stuff today, so I'm not going to go into this deeply, but Amir, the two ways Docker containers, the file beat directly to Elastic or from the file beat to Logstash, then to Elastic. Which way do you recommend? I recommend the simplest way that works for you. So if it works without Logstash for you, then do that. I was a person that came from only using Logstash before FileBeat existed, so I'm not really going to be an expert on the nuances of how each one of those is completely different. But I would say the one that has the least ways to break. Oh, nice. Bass customization with Corey Schaefer's YouTube tutorials. Doesn't cover ZSH. So I started with ZSH years ago after spending many decades in Bash, and just really started to love it. I couldn't really get on the Fish shell bandwagon, although some people love Fish. So when we start talking about shells, I use this. ZSH is now the default in Mac. It's installed in most Linux distributions, and you can get it on Windows. So the main reason that I like ZSH is because you can get oh-my-zsh. And this is all, by the way, all in my shell list here. I'm going to put this back into chat just in case you're joining recently. So in here under shell, let's see. Where's my oh-my-zsh? Yeah, there we go. So oh-my-zsh is like, it's not really a distribution of ZSH. It's just a dependency manager. All right. So this runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac, by the way. And they give you install instructions on their website. It's oh-my-zsh. It's a pretty awesome domain name. And then what this does is this gives you a really fancy default setup inside of ZSH. So what it's really doing there is, if I just open up my ZSHRC, it gives you a bunch of different plugins and defaults, and I think that's not the file I want to be in. Actually, I want to be in there we go. So it has a default, a bunch of default scripts that start up, and one of them, okay, is it not that one? Let me find it here. There we go. All right, you see this line 34 right here? So oh-my-zsh comes with a list of plugins that change the behavior of your shell. And so it has all this stuff out of the box. And you can enable all these other plugins. So I enable plugins for Git. I mean, there's just tons of stuff in here. Tmux, zsh completion. So when you see me at the command line typing, and it's starting to fill things out, like cd, see how it fills out that dot files, and I can just hit my right arrow to automatically complete it. That is, for example, this zsh auto suggestions. I also have zsh completions in here, so that's the tab completion. So that when I do like curl and then tab, I can have it autofill in the file, or HTTP, stuff like that. Or if I'm doing a git command, it'll give me this awesome tab. So I'm just hitting tab, 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 tab. These are all plugins for oh-my-zsh. Now, you don't have to have oh-my-zsh for zsh. There are other zsh plugin or distribution dependency managers or whatever you want to call them. But I like oh-my-zsh. Some people don't like it because it does too much. That's always a challenge. You got to have your right balance. So, but I would do that. So oh-my-zsh has a super install, quick one-liner, and you have to be running it on zsh. Well, actually, you have to have it in a sh compatible shell first, and then it will set zsh as your. I'm not sure if it sets zsh as a default, but on Windows, you will probably need to install zsh first, and then you can install oh-my-zsh to set up inside of there. Yeah, so over here, it's got a one-liner install for oh-my-zsh. All right, how do you manage different useful Linux commands, always Googling, or is a handy tool which would allow this without just using CLI auto-completion? I don't manage those. It's simply memory. I don't know how, other than Googling or trying something at the command line. For example, when I know something starts with D, but I can't figure out what else it is, and I hit tab, it says, do you want to list all 169 possibilities for any program starting with D? And if I say yes, then it's going to give me this list. This list over here. Let's try that again. So if I just type D and hit tab, zsh will suggest all the possibilities. Oops. D, tab, and then yes. It'll list me all of the commands that start with D on my machine. So I don't really actually know how you would do something better than that. There's maybe some command line utilities that help you search for words inside of commands. Someone probably knows that in the chat, but I've never used any of those things. I'm either Googling or just doing that at the command line if I'm not really sure the name of something. There's the which command. So often I'll wonder, okay, like which kube control am I running on my machine? Is it the one that is installed with Docker? Is it the one that I installed through Bru? If you're on Linux, is it the kube control that's installed with micro K8s or micro K8s or whatever, or Minikube or something like that? Or is it the one installed? So you can do that. So and then which Docker will tell me where my Docker's installed. Also, sometimes I'm curious which ZSH I'm running. So on Mac, there is the system ZSH, which is in bin.zsh. And you can see that it has a version of 5.7, but I'm running a different version of ZSH, which I install with Bru on Mac. So it's a little bit newer. I don't know why I do that. I just do. Yeah. Kevin also dislikes ligatures. So yes, I think they're cool. They're funky. They mess up things for me, and they look different. And not every system I'm on has ligature support, so it looks different. And I like consistency. So I always want my shell setup to be the consistent way on every system I'm on. In fact, for example, on this Linux system I'm on over here. Let me just attach. So I'm on a Linux machine. Do I have a keyword? What's going on there? SSH in the Linux again. Oh, this is funny. This is something I'm going to talk about in a minute. I have a problem with my Linux machine because every time I hit a command line, it's running a Docker command in the background because I was troubleshooting something. So that machine's broke. But the thing I wanted to point out here was I changed my shell prompt through oh-my-zsh, because oh-my-zsh has themes. And I changed that theme, which we'll get to in a minute because I see some questions on my themes. I changed that theme to have a penguin so that it's basically the easiest way for me to know that I'm on my Ubuntu server in my closet and not on my Mac locally. Because when your shell looks exactly the same on every server that you have or every machine that you're constantly using, it can be a little confusing which one I'm on. And sure, I could name the titles up there. I could do all that stuff. But I thought this would be an interesting way for me to know that I was in Linux, was to actually have that little penguin. Let me close some of these. All right, so let's typically use local files, Trello, and etcd to store some of these. And of course, I have to Google. Oh, okay, that wasn't a question. Aliases you use and shortcuts. So aliases, almost all of my aliases come from other people. So with ZSH, if you go to the ZSH, and so like you just go look up let's see, oh-my-zsh Docker compose, for example. So what you'll do is you'll come into so what you want to look for in oh-my-zsh is the plugin for that particular application. So for example, Docker Compose is a great one because I use Docker Compose every day and I don't want to type out docker-compose. So this plugin, which I add this plugin, remember the plugin thing. So I, let's see, DSHRC. And so in line 34 over here, I have all my plugins, and one of those is Docker Compose. Somewhere in there. Well, let's see, maybe it's not in there, but you can do it this way. I do it, I think I have a custom one. Yeah, I think I customized it because I'm stupid. But the point there is that inside of this plugin for Docker Compose, it gives me all these aliases. So I don't even make my own aliases a lot of the time. I'm just using a plugin in my shell for some common tool like Terraform or Kube Control. You can get plugins in oh-my-zsh that comes with all sorts of default aliases so that you can do things like, I can just type K. That's not going to work because I don't have Kubernetes running. But I can use K for Kubernetes, or I can use DCO for Docker Compose, right? That's not going to work because I don't have Docker running. But anyway, so I don't make a lot of custom aliases. The aliases that I tend to make are ones that hop me to a directory. Oops, I'm on the wrong shell again. So yeah, so K get all DCOPS, right? I'm going to just do current. Let's do that. Set this up to do current application. Yeah. So I do these aliases like this, but my aliases tend to be very boring. They tend to be, if I type C4, which means go to the directory of my fourth course. And all that is alias, C4 equals, CD to the path of the directory, right? It's nothing exciting. So common directories, common projects I'm on, I will often make an alias. And those are all managed inside of oh-my-zsh. So in oh-my-zsh, you learn when you go through their documentation in their wiki. Let's see, up here on oh-my-zsh wiki, definitely go through this whole thing, and you'll learn about plugins and themes and all this stuff. And one of the things you'll learn about is customization. So the way you customize is through, let's see, let's go back to .files, oh-my-zsh. So I have a custom directory, and I basically set an environment variable, and that tells oh-my-zsh to use this directory for all my overrides, basically anything custom, including themes, plugins, aliases. You'll see I have a secret alias file, so that's where I try to keep some of my like API codes and stuff like that I need for secrets. And then I make that, I don't commit that to Git, right? So that stays out of the Git repo. But here inside of plugins, or themes rather, I want to show you the themes. So I have my present. All right. That is also in my sweet shell setup. So there was a question here. Tommy says, didn't you have some kind of presentation mode for your shell for not confusing people while watching tutorials? Absolutely. So let's talk about that. That is here under the bonus tweaks tools section. Let's see. Oh, custom ZSH prompt. So here where the Docker logo, the whale logo, that's not the Docker logo, it's just a whale emoji. If you go to that, this is going to be a gist that is my oh-my-zsh theme. And so then you would go over to oh-my-zsh's wiki, and you would learn about setting up the custom theme there. And what mine does is it's a combination of aliases to commands as well as custom shell. So it's a little bit dumbed down right now, but what it means is if I am in a directory, it's going to go here. Okay, so I'm in this directory, right? I'm in a super deep directory, and I have a bunch of stuff going on in my shell. I have the git commit or git branch I'm on. I have this whiskey logo. You know, I have stuff that maybe I don't want to confuse people with. So I will, this inside of here, it tells you all these things that you should do, and there's some documentation on it. But in essence, when I type present, it will disable all ZSH plugins, which means that the predictive type, right? All those predictive things, it'll get rid of that. It gets rid, if you've noticed, that the commands I type are actually green, and the reason they're green is because in the background, ZSH is looking up whether that command truly exists. So when I'm typing out a command, if I fat finger it, it'll be red, and it'll help me know that that was what my problem was, is I mistyped a command. Those are all ZSH things that come with oh-my-zsh and those plugins. Well, I don't want that stuff in a demo, so when I type present, and then I go to a brand new shell, because I have to restart my shell to disable that stuff, then that's the first thing, is that disabled all my ZSH. Then I have to go to the directory that I want to be in. So maybe I'll go back to that C4 directory, and then I type whale. Well, I don't know why, but basically it would create this really dumbed down shell interface that is, there's nothing to it, right? When I type a command, there's no colors, there's no predictive read ahead, it's not doing anything like auto suggestions. The reason is if you've ever taken my Docker Mastery course, the most common questions are, how do I set up this custom shell of mine? And that distracts people from the Docker learning. Like, we all want a really cool shell, but that's not the point of the course, and we end up with a lot of questions in the course around my shell. So when I'm presenting on stage, one of the most common questions, if I had my custom shell set up, one of the common questions I would get is, how do you set up that shell? How do you do all that cool shell stuff? So I've learned to, basically in a demo, I never tab complete. I think this actually, I don't think it doesn't disable tab completion, but I've learned to never tab complete, never do any wizardry in the shell, because it will take people out of the learning of the thing we're trying to learn, and they'll start thinking, ooh, this shell is really cool. I do the same thing when I'm watching Scott Hanselman on his custom Windows setup. I'm always intrigued on that little thing he's doing. So I've learned to disable that. And then when I'm done, I just do unpresent, and it turns everything back on, except for my npm completion. Got me an error there. And then I'm back to this. Now, you will notice this little bar at the top of my screen, and this is an iTerm thing, specifically an iTerm. It now has, if you're in the latest version of iTerm, 3.3 or newer, I think, you have this status bar, which gives you all this custom stuff you can do. You can have CPU utilization, network throughput, battery life, all this stuff. And it's not really a part of your shell. It's really a part of the terminal emulator. So I used to do a bunch of that stuff in my shell, but you'll notice now that all of that is in that little tiny bar at the top, and it's really tiny. It might be hard for you to see. I might actually just zoom that in temporarily. But I like that in iTerm. And I can change the font. Can I not? Oh, here we go. Yeah, so it's really big there. Yeah, and so when I go into a directory, you'll see that the path, it shows the path there, and then if the path is too long, it automatically shrinks it. And in my case, what I'm doing is I'm showing Git, and then I'm showing my Docker context, and then actually, it looks like I made it too big because I can't fit everything. So I have my Docker context in there, and I also have my kube control context, because if I'm managing multiple servers or multiple systems, that can be confusing as well. So let's change that to maybe not so big, 12. See how that looks. All right. Yeah, so you'll see up at the top there, the purple on the very top right is my kube control context. Then I have my Docker context, and I have technically my Git context, which is my Git branch, and whether I have commits or I have stage stuff or whatever, and then my path over on the right there. And you can do all sorts of other stuff, but that's an iTerm specific thing. I presume you're using ZSH under WSL because I can't find the distro in Scoop or Chocolatey. All right, so on Windows, let's see if we can have a lot of. I even have a Mac machine over here that we can use in case we wanted to set up a custom thing on Mac. But over here on Windows, so yes, my ZSH setup, which this one actually I don't have set up because this is a fresh machine actually. Yes, I use WSL just because I used to be a PowerShell person. I'm no longer a PowerShell is great if you're running 1,000 Windows servers and you need to manage them with PowerShell. I don't do that anymore, so I don't need PowerShell. So I'm going to do everything inside of WSL now. I used to use like Git Bash, right? So there was a Windows binary of Bash, and there's a Windows binary of ZSH somewhere. But now that I can run with the same OS and I can still access all my files there, yes, I definitely use WSL2. Technically, this one's WSL2. So, because WSL2 is awesome. Do I still write Bash scripts for production stuff? How do you cope with jumping between Bash and ZSH? So, yes, I don't actually write ZSH scripts, because the only thing I know is like the standard stuff in Bash and SH. I will normally, if I have to write any scripts, it will be a Bash script. I don't think I've ever written a ZSH only script. Maybe once or twice on my local Linux system, but that was me just copy and pasting from the internet. So I don't write a lot of scripts anymore, except for my local machine for convenience. I don't do much shelling in servers. Usually, we have something like Terraform, Ansible, CloudFormation, Docker, whatever. We have all those tools now, so I try to avoid that stuff. At most, it might be a one-liner that I put into some sort of kube control command or Windows, or I'm sorry, like a Docker CMD might just be a one-line for loop in Bash, but it's always Bash. I don't write anything custom ZSH. Quite frankly, I wouldn't know how to write ZSH specific code in a shell script. Docker and DevOps. I'm trying to develop a tool for this and integrate with lots of software. Not sure about this question. Sorry, Vlad. I don't understand your question here on that. So if you could give me more information. Yeah, so all new installs of Mac now default to ZSH due to what we believe is licensing issues. I think that's great. It's a little bit inconsistent with every other Linux out there, but I'm a fan of both. And I think that most people, the minute you get into shells, you're going to customize it yourself anyway, right? Like, it doesn't really matter the default. Every Mac for the last 10 years, I have replaced with ZSH, my default shell inside of Mac. So it doesn't really matter. I don't see why the default matters. I guess the point is that in the future, any automation may be ZSH specific on the Mac or something. But yeah, Docker context. Yeah, Docker context, that kind of stuff. That's just an alias. It just I number my courses. So what does C4 mean? I have aliases for all my courses, so I can go to the directory. So you can imagine when you sell courses for a living, every day you're answering questions about your courses. So that means every day you're going in to your course repo and you're testing stuff for students. For instance, someone today said that Jekyll was broke, so I had to do some Jekyll testing, and so I need to get inside of the courses, and I just number them. So my first course I launched was course 1. And course 2, course 3, nothing magical there. Buy Custom Shell Mastery on Udemy. So I will admit that I do have a plan to release a course on all of this stuff. So what you're seeing today, this is like ad lib, but I do plan on putting all this together in a course, or basically like a format that would be good as a resource for you, and launching it. And if you're on my newsletter, or if you're here or anywhere that on my Patreon, if you follow me on Patreon, you will be the first people to know. So in case you didn't know, patreon.com/Brett Fisher. If you follow me there, you will get updates as soon as I launch any new content or courses, right? So thanks for the reminder, Kevin. Yeah, 10,000 courses on shell customization. Yeah, I'm certainly there's certainly no shortage of those. Yeah. Panda dies every time you have to shell. How do I recover SSH connections with multiple servers without again and again typing password? Don't use passwords. Use SSH keys or certificates, but SSH keys is the normal. I don't use passwords really for anything other than like a default. If I'm installing in a server, well, no, not even then, because if I'm installing a server in a cloud, my keys are always added to those by all the clouds. So I will tell you that Mosh is awesome. So of course, now I've got an error in Mosh. Wait, am I on the right server? Looks like I broke Mosh the last. Yeah, I messed with this weekend. But Mosh is also in here. Is Mosh in here? I think so. Yeah. So I now do a bunch of stuff on my iPad, and you probably have seen a ton of YouTube videos on iPad-based development or iPad-based shells. The best one out there is Blink. So if you have an iPad and you're interested in using a shell on your iPad, Blink is absolutely the way to go. Blink.sh. And it gives you a full screen terminal emulator on your iPad, which I then use Mosh, because it has Mosh built into it. And Mosh is a UDP-based SSH. So it wraps the SSH client inside UDP, which means it doesn't it provides a reliable connection, essentially. Basically, if you've ever had SSH and then you walk away, your computer goes to sleep, or you swap networks, maybe you go from wired to wireless, or you hop from one wireless to another, SSH always kills the connection. And depending on your shell, it will freeze your terminal, and you'll have to close your terminal. And so Mosh alleviates all that. It has a couple of cons. One of those is that it doesn't have automatic scroll back in your terminal emulator, but you can get around that using tmux. And I use it on airplanes. I use it when I'm traveling. I always use it when I'm on my iPad, because I'm probably going to swap apps in the iPad, and the way that iPad handles its memory, it will often freeze things in the background, which would cause SSH to disconnect. And so Mosh is a wrapper for that puts it into UDP packets. So technically in the background, Mosh is running a daemon on the other end of your connection. It initializes through SSH, then starts a Mosh daemon on port 30,000 something. It tells you down here at the bottom, or somewhere in the install. And then, so once you've opened that port up, making sure that you have that access to that port, then Mosh will reestablish itself over UDP and provide that always-on connection, which means that I can basically have my iPad, and when I have Mosh, the Blink shell, and tmux, sorry, not tmux, not tmux. So when I have tmux and Mosh together, the three of those, so we're talking about Blink, Mosh, and then tmux. Does tmux not have a homepage? Yeah, it's just the wiki inside of GitHub. And so these three there are the sweet spot on any sort of tablet, right? Even on your phone. So what that means is I bring up my Blink shell on my iPad, and I type Mosh, whatever my server is, and you can create aliases so that inside there, so you just have to type the friendly name. My Mac is just called Mac, so I can actually SSH into my Mac, and that automatically brings up tmux and automatically puts me right back into Vim where I was editing before, basically. So it's a sweet setup. Basically, I could just swap over to Blink, and then my stuff is right there. It reconnects to the server automatically in the background, and tmux is already running, and my Vim and all of my shells are already running, and it's fantastic. So I don't use that on my local Mac machine, just because tmux can be complicated. If you don't have to use it, then don't use it. tmux has its own special shortcuts for things. So if you're used to Mac shortcuts, tmux shortcuts will be different. And yeah. The other thing there is, I found, this is a really great one. This is a recent one I just found. Oh-my-tmux. So if you've ever tried tmux and you're confused with all the setup, oh-my-tmux gives you that sort of one-stop shop, easy startup script inside of tmux without having to learn all the nuances of tmux. It makes your bottom bar in tmux work better by default. It's prettier. It has all these features. It actually will automatically find your battery utilization and show you that. It does not work on unless it's local. It won't work over SSH, I don't think. Actually, well, it does work over SSH, but it won't tell me my iPad battery. It'll tell me my Mac battery when I'm SSHing into my Mac. But anyway, it's got a lot of cool stuff built in, and it's like 3 or 4 lines to install it. So if you're new to tmux, definitely try oh-my-tmux. And so that will help you with your remote shell. All right. Please tweet about the shell mastery. Yeah. I don't know if I'll stick with the mastery theme on that, but that's a great name. I like the idea. Shell mastery. Can I tail? Basically, thumbs up this video if you want me to make the shell mastery course. I never thought of that name, but that's actually pretty funny. Can I tail a file from a remote server so that I don't have to SSH into them? CD to directory and then tail there. I don't know how to do that. So I live in containers, right? So this kind of what this show's about is Docker and Kubernetes. Those two tools can connect to a remote machine without SSH, and those two tools have tail built into them. They have the logs command, which is essentially like a tail. So I would normally do that. I don't remember the last time I had to tail a log file directly on a server. But if I did that, if I needed to do that, you could always do it in a one-line SSH. But basically, you're SSHing and then typing the command after SSH. So you could always tail a file after that. And then it's not a two-stepper. It's not two different steps. It's just a one-line command. But I don't know of a tool that does that. Whatever tool that does that, it basically is going to have to SSH for you. So, you're going to have to use SSH regardless, unless you're using something like Docker, the command line, or kube control. Yeah, VS Code remote containers. So thanks for that suggestion. There was a whole nother show we did. If you look at this YouTube channel that you're watching right now, if you're on YouTube, we did a show like a month or so ago on VS Code, and we talked about remote containers and all that stuff. I love it. It's great. Do I use infrastructure as code tools and configuration management tools? Yes, I mostly use Git, Terraform, Docker, kube control, kubectx, AWS CLI, which is not infrastructure as code, but unless you're applying CloudFormation. I use Flux, which is a GitOps tool, Flux. Trying to learn Argo, which is another GitOps tool, ARGO, Argo CD. BioBoo. It's a layer over tmux to facilitate usage. UIOBU. I've not heard of that one. I'll check that out. Thank you. Yes to the shell mastery course. All right. All right. Everyone wants the shell mastery course. Yeah. So I have these 3 machines. Let's see. This fresh Mac machine that I was going to set up. I need to install these tools. I don't know if I can install. There we go. All right, how about some music? All right, so you can continue to ask questions, and I'll check those every few minutes. But Chrome themes, I don't actually use Chrome themes. I don't think so. This actually isn't Chrome. This is Edge. This is the new Edge. Just trying it out, seeing whether I like it. Yeah. Love tmux, hate the copy and paste in and out of it. Yeah, so between Vim copy paste, tmux copy paste, and being an iTerm on a Mac, it is probably the worst hell of text that I have to remember special keyboard shortcuts for each one of those things. Yeah, it's the worst. Does it beat Safari? I don't know. I use them all. So I have used Edge maybe a combined total of 4 hours. So I just thought I'd use it on the show today because I know Safari, I know Firefox, but I'm hearing a lot of stuff about the new Edge and its performance advantages and improvements. So I'm trying it out. In case you're wondering, this is a Mac VM. If you are on a Mac and you have parallel tools, one of the cool things that it does is it lets you create a virtual Mac machine on your Mac. So I'm running Mac on Mac. This allows me to do things like from a brand new machine perspective that I don't get, because I don't have a bunch of extra Macs laying around to do testing of how it is to set up a terminal or something. Then I have another machine here on Windows 10. This one actually, now that I think about it, it is not WSL2. In fact, I'm not even sure. Yeah, I'm on 1909 on this one. This is a different one than my WSL2 box. So this is one where I'm going to make some videos around updating to WSL2 for Docker. And this is a machine I'm saving to do that. So I've got a long list of to-dos. I'm making videos on WSL2 for Docker and how that relates to Windows 10 users. And then that, by the way, that includes Windows 10 Home people now, so that's exciting. And then I want to make some of these other videos on terminal and including custom setup of Mac. And then I have my Mint machine. So if you're on Linux as a desktop, my favorite is Mint. I just like the interface mostly, and I use Tilix on that. As you can see, I have oh-my-zsh running in here. So that's my Linux setup for a Linux desktop. For a Linux server, I also tend to, like if it's a custom personal machine, I do install oh-my-zsh and then SpaceVim. We haven't talked about SpaceVim, but SpaceVim is a distribution or basically a dependency manager of NeoVim and Vim. NeoVim is a faster, newer alternative to Vim that has a more advanced functionality for those that need it. I'm not sure that I actually need it. I just like that it's being rewritten with a new front end and it's got a new built-in shell thing. So anyway, that's NeoVim, so you don't have to use Vim. So there's the NeoVim project. And then I use SpaceVim on top of that. SpaceVim is the distribution of package manager, or a package manager for Vim. It's not really a distribution of Vim. But I'll put SpaceVim in there. Kevin, new Edge is amazing. I don't even have Chrome installed anymore. All right, Kevin, give me like one feature other than speed that you like more on Edge than you do on Chrome, because I don't. It keeps bugging me about this collections thing, but I tried it and I didn't get it. Like it didn't really, like I couldn't really share a bunch of bookmarks. It didn't make any sense to me. It said it was allow me to collect and share or something, and I couldn't. So my biggest problem is, what was that? There was a tool back in the day, like 5 years ago or more, that allows you to sync all your bookmarks across all your different browsers. I loved it. I can't think of the name of it, but it basically stopped working. It was I was even paying for it, I think a couple dollars a month or something. So my biggest beef is like, it's a headache to use different browsers because I never have, and I'm a bookmark crazy person. I basically use bookmarks as a way to know if I've used that thing before or I've been there, or like when it's like my own little personal Google search. That's how I use bookmarks. So when I want to find out some sort of Vim thing, I just type Vim and I can see all, so like I have Vim Awesome, which is a way to learn Vim. The Vim cheat sheet, which I have here, in case you're wanting to learn some of the common Vim commands. I don't really use that anymore because of space Vim. But anyway, that's kind of how I use bookmarks. I don't really ever use the GUI to go through bookmarks. I just use it as a way to see, like if I do, just search backup, right? So then I have a bunch of bookmarks for backup utilities that helps me find things. Like, oh, here's the Docker tips for backup and restore, right? That's kind of how I use bookmarks. Favorite distro or OS? I think in terms of a Linux server, it's always Ubuntu. It's the one I've always used, and it has, to me, the broadest community support, the largest community. It's free. It has long-term support edition that's stable. I find a ton of the documentation on the internet assumes you have a Debian-based install distribution. So you're using apt or something like that. So, and at this point, all of my Docker files and scripts and everything are all based on apt-get and other apt commands. So I tend to just stick with that. For a desktop, I like Mint. I like Mint with the cinnamon GUI. I just think it's clean and minimal and looks nice. iTerm 2 become more smart than before. It supports all the features that tmux says. Yeah. So in case you're a Mac person, that's a good point. Thanks for reminding me. So inside of iTerm, it has some features for tmux, and essentially it will allow tmux to run in a native window, and it takes over some of the tmux functionality. So it reduces the keyboard strain, I would call it, of using tmux with all the special shortcuts, like command B and then C, or command B, D, like all these different commands just to create new windows. You can basically use the iTerm shortcuts for a lot of those things. So yeah, I actually by the way, let's just do a Patreon shout out. I'm on Patreon. You can support me on Patreon. That's a bad example. Let me go over here. Go to Chrome. So I'm on Patreon. You can find me at patreon.com/Brett Fisher. But what I want to do, I have to find posts from my creators. All right, so these are all the people I'm supporting. And one of them is George. Let me go over to George's page. So this is the creator of iTerm 2. So if you ever use iTerm 2 on a Mac, I recommend you give him some dollars. Give him a couple dollars, just a couple little, buy him a coffee. And he has been running this, a decade or more at least. He's been doing this, and he has regular updates. He has betas. I just got a new notification for beta today. So please, would you, skip my donation, go give him one for a minute, because he makes some really great software. I am on his list. I donate to him every month a couple of dollars, and You can see my other ones here. Brian Tong is a great Apple and tech talker on YouTube. He used to work at CNET, but now he does his own thing, and I'm a big fan of his. Arrested DevOps is a podcast on DevOps. They also have a Patreon. Riker is actually a gamer, and I like what he does, so I give him a couple of bucks a month. Homebrew, the homebrew for now Linux. By the way, in case you didn't know, you can use Bru on Linux now. I'm not sure if I have it installed here. And I love it. Yeah. So I don't have Bru on that machine, but on my Ubuntu machine, which is currently broken. Actually, bring up terminal. Maybe that'll fix it. Yeah. Now, I wonder what I did inside the ZSH. All right, anyway. So you can now do like Bru install. It's probably already installed. But I could do that, and I'm on a Linux machine. That's what's crazy about it. Is it'll intelligently install the apt-get or whatever. And the nice thing is you can have different versions. I'm just gonna kill it because I don't really want it to do that. So it doesn't work for everything on Linux. Apt is still kind of the default, but for the stuff a lot of the stuff you're used to on Mac, it will install it and then it puts it in a different place and then makes the symlinks, right? So it's not permanently glunking up your the Linux machine. The other thing this is really good for is fonts. So if you, I know I'm all over the board here, but fonts is something we didn't talk about heavily, but Bru Fonts is an awesome thing. If you want to learn how, there we go. It's right here. This is the way I install fonts on all my systems. Linux or Mac. I don't know about Windows. I don't know if it does it on Windows. But I don't think there is a Bru for Windows yet. That would be super cool. But anyway, the point here is this is how I get all of the nerd fonts and all of my custom programming fonts. I get them on Mac or Linux. And so when I want to set up, for example, my remote shell on my Linux system for Vim, I need the fonts to be there for all of the, not the ligatures, but the other advanced stuff that you get with the nerd fonts, right? We talked about nerd fonts over here. And so if you want those on Linux, even on a Linux server, you will have to install the font. So I do that with the Bru font installs so that I don't have to learn all the different ways to install fonts on Mac and Linux, right? So back over here, I think you saw some of those on the list. This week in security, you can look that one up. It's a really good, he's a journalist and he has a weekly email newsletter that you can get for free, but I give him a couple of bucks a month to support that. Ashley makes if you're a Go language fan or if you are in the Kubernetes or container community, you have definitely seen Ashley's work. She creates all sorts of art, essentially, around Gophers and other things, other logos, and she's made logos for lots of meetups, and she does all that stuff for free, but we donate money to her every month just because she does that for free. Patrick, if you're a Mac person and you care about security, Patrick is a super smart guy about Mac security. He's always finding the latest viruses and breaking them down, how they work. That's really interesting. He creates a lot of good security tools. He speaks at Black Hat, other places you can actually see these in there. And then Carnivore Cast, which is a podcast about meat, essentially, which I really like to listen to. So those are all of my things on Patreon I'm a fan of. All right, let's see if we have any more questions here. I think Parallels will die with the new ARM Macs. Interesting thing, but I don't know. Because if Parallels... Okay, so what we do know about the new Macs with ARM is that you will not be able to run x64, let's see, AMD 64 compatible Windows. But Windows, here's the thing that they're not talking about. Windows is now has an ARM release. And so what I'm thinking the future is going to be is Parallels on a Mac will run the ARM-based Linux and ARM-based Windows, for ARM-based Mac users. Yeah, that's what I think is going to happen. So I don't think it's going to die, but I think certainly those of us that need to run a Windows machine that's x86 compatible, obviously we're not going to be able to do that on ARM, and I don't think Parallels is going to be able to do emulation of x86 on top of ARM. I don't believe that exists yet. That's a good point. Yeah, I'm excited about the future of Mac, but I'm not super excited about leaving Intel, just because of the architecture. I mean, everything I do is x86, so yeah. I watch tons of videos about shell customization. By the way, on my YouTube, so Brett.live, I have a playlist which are not my, doesn't have my videos, but I have a playlist on Windows 10 Ultimate Shell. Go away, go away. I will put this into chat. This is my playlist, and it's basically almost all Scott Hanselman stuff, as well as a Nick Janatakis video. Both people have really good customization videos for their shells, and I'm only going to be this much of theirs. Like, theirs is really good. I'm going to be not near as good. So, Kevin says memory performance. Well, and all the Chrome extensions work. Xmarks, Paul, nailed it. Xmarks. That was the bookmark syncer for all the different browsers that I don't believe is around anymore. At least I don't think it works very well. I think they shut it all down, the servers and everything. Anyone using Brave browser? I'm not. I tried it, but I already have too many browsers. It was tough to justify, and I appreciate what they're doing for the industry. I love that they're trying to change the journalism away from ad-based, but I feel like so many other people are trying to do that. So, like Medium, and now you got places like New York Times that are just doing their own thing. They're not even on app. They're pulling out of Apple News and everything else. So they're just subscribing. WSL2 on Docker for Windows. Is there any way to limit resource allocation from host machine, CPU cores, RAM like it was in Hyper-V variant? No, because I believe WSL2 does all that for you. So the nice thing is that you don't have to, because it's only going to use the limitations that it needs. In other words, it's going to use all the cores or all the memory just like a regular Windows app. And then when it's not using that stuff, it won't use them. So the problem was with Hyper-V is you have to dedicate memory to that VM for Docker, and you don't have to do that anymore. Now WSL2 just dynamically uses it from the host when it's needed. Which I mean, maybe for some uses you do want that very limited. I only want this to run, but the negative part of that is it's always using that RAM whether it needs it or not. So you can still, by the way, switch back and forth inside of Docker, and you can always create Hyper-V VMs on Windows 10, manually install Docker on them. You can always do that. I mean, the thing about Docker Desktop is that Docker Desktop is designed to make it so native that you don't even realize that you're running Docker in a VM. So that's exactly what WSL2 does for us. If you're trying to do other kinds of testing or sort of limited use stuff, then I would just make manual VMs and install Docker on it. So it's a good point. I like your point, but I think that's the focus of Docker Desktop, is to make it super simple. Never use more resources than it needs. Always give the resources back. Native command line, super good performance, and they're constantly trying to do that, right? The dot file repo. I've got inspiration now for finally making a dot file repo. Yeah. So. There's some. I haven't actually had to create a fresh one, in a decade. So, good luck. Dot files are amazing, and I love mine. But it's another one of those things that it constantly gets out of date, because I always wanted to have all of my settings, but also all of my installations so that I can just like put it on a machine, run a couple of commands, and like it sets everything up. But it's never up to date. It's always got some sort of old things in it, or things I don't use anymore, or it forgets my new tools. So I feel like it's also like the upkeep of .files is a burden. Is Mint still your recommendation for low resource demand Linux GUI VM? I don't really care about the usage, so I've never focused on that. I've focused on ease of use and does it look nice and function well. And I'm not an expert, like because I use a Mac every day. Windows and Linux VMs I use a couple times a week, but I don't use them all day long. So I'm definitely not going to be an expert. If I am not a fan of CentOS because everything on it is so old. If I'm going to use a desktop or something, I want the thing with all the latest kernels, all the latest tools, and I find that Yum tends to always not have what apt has, and CentOS always has a really old kernel. And I'm that's just me. CentOS has a lot of good uses, but I'm a little negative on it just because anyone who I talk to who has problems on servers or problems with machines, they're more likely going to be on CentOS because it's, not as compatible with all the modern stuff, at least in my experience. So. Thanks for being a fan, Sanjay. Appreciate it. Nerd fonts are awesome. Yes. Power level 10K. Ooh, I've not heard of power level 10K. Well, the thing is, Maz, is that you can run them both because it's not gonna Bru's not actually using apt on the back end, right? It's using its own thing. So, I like on my machine, I know I don't install any fonts with apt. So I know that if I'm going to install a font, it's going to be through Bru. Bru tends to have easier support, and it has a larger list, right? Because in order to get something into Bru, it's just a get. It's a pull request. In order to get something into apt, right, you usually have to have a custom PPA. Like, it just gets really complicated with that. So, at the end of the day, I don't want to have to manage a bunch of PPAs, right? I want to just install software and move on, and then be able to update all that software on the fly. The problem with apt is that I'm always using, LTEs, the long-term, stable releases, and so that always ends up having old packages like old Vim, old Docker, all these things. That's maybe a bad example because I'm not sure if Bru on Linux installs Docker, but yeah, that's my justification. But hey, that's why we have multiple package managers. We can all do what we want. Thanks for all the work. I appreciate it. Thanks, Sanjay. Brave was fun for a week. Yeah, exactly. It was cool. I wish them well. I don't know if they're still around. What's the real difference between Bash and ZSH? I had my Bash customized on Mac, and after upgrading to Catalina ZSH, wondering if I should switch back to Bash or spend time customizing ZSH. I don't know. I think that most of the stuff in modern Bash can be done the same way as ZSH. So to me, it's more about it's kind of like saying, what's the advantage of Node.js over, I don't know, C or Python or whatever. To me, it's about community. It's about the plugins that are available, the updated plugins. And I don't understand the inner workings of ZSH versus Bash, but I can tell you that, one example would be on my local machine with ZSH. Let's see if I just do Docker and then I tab, I get this menu that I can come down with my arrow keys inside of ZSH. I have never seen how you could do that in Bash. You notice how it's describing them? There may be a way to do it in Bash, and maybe someone just didn't create those things in Bash. But I find that the tab completion is better. There's some things I can do in ZSH. For example, if I'm typing this command, all right, so let me do a Control R to search, and I'm going to search cube control. Oops. No, I don't want that. I want to search through all my cube control commands that I've had, right? So, and then if I want to, I like Vim. I use Vim all the time. So I can actually escape out of my command line, and I get the Vim functionality in my command line, which means I can insert, or I can actually, wait, maybe it's not working. Oh, there we go. So I just pulled that into a Vim terminal so I could edit that command. I don't know why I would ever do that, but if it's not working, let's see. Must have I think I might have broke my Vim on here. So there's a Vim mode inside of ZSH that allows me to basically move around my command line with Vim commands. So I can, it's not working. So again, I've been playing with stuff all week and I broke it. So anyway, I don't know if you can do that with Bash. That's just a couple of things. And there's probably way smarter answers in chat. Yeah, I mean, scripts are the same, but I would say there's probably some really good YouTube videos on why ZSH in terms of its base functionality at the command line. Now I'm wanting to troubleshoot that. I want to figure out what. It's not in there. It's in my. Yeah, so this VI mode right here. If you look that up, it's a plugin for ZSH. Yeah. And ZSH Vim mode, all this stuff. So if you're someone who just loves Vim and you wish that your terminal was like Vim, that this can help you. Basically allows you to move around really long commands really easily. I can hit, capital A and it'll put it into the beginning of my terminal line, stuff like that. Yeah, auto suggestions plugin. Using Elasticsearch cluster via Docker Swarm, is it a good idea in production? Sure. I mean, you would set up each Elasticsearch node as its own service, and then you could use DNS round robin to connect between them. I would disable VIP, the default VIP mode on the service, so change the mode in the service to be DNSRR. Yeah, good luck, Paul. Let us know. All right, how's my little Mac machine over here doing? All right, and I've been on here for an hour and a half, and if you're just now joining, I'm basically working on some tooling and instructions from my suite setup. So this is my shell setup, and I'll put that in the chat. See if I can make that a little easier for screen. But anyway, I have a bunch of instructions here, and then I have 3 machines. So I have the parallel tools. Yeah, looks like Parallels is installed. Oh, can I not change the resolution? Oh, bummer. I'm gonna make this machine a little bigger. display, 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 display. All these, I don't know. There we go. Do that. Make all these the same size. We can switch back and forth. All right, so we're gonna close all that. All right, and I think on this one, a snapshot, right? Yeah. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up on Linux. Actually, let's get some votes. Put into chat which OS you want me to start from scratch and build basically my ultimate shell setup. Like let's do this in the order of the people watching and what shell you care about the most. Do you care about Mac, Linux, or Windows? I'll give you 30 seconds. So this is Stream Beats from Harris Heller. By the way, Harris Heller's got an awesome show. He's a great YouTuber and also a musician. And he came up with this great idea of creating something called Stream Beats. So just look up Stream Beats in any tool, and it allows you to play music he created. I think he has a producer or somebody that he works with, but they created all these albums. And they, let's see. So the playlist is called Stream Beats. It seems to just be this. He had albums. All right, let's do this. There we go. All right, so under Harris, we have all these different albums, and they're all designed as background music. But specifically the Stream Beats stuff. And it's kind of genius what he did, because we all play it for free. There's no copyright. He worked with all of the different companies to make sure that copyright wouldn't get flagged. But I think he's making money off of the plays, right? So he's, for those of us that pay, or the ads or whatever that pay for this stuff on, Apple Music, Google Music, Spotify, stuff like that. And he's got all these increasing number of albums. He just keeps throwing down these albums. He's putting out a ton of it. And I'll put this link. So anyway, you can play this stuff in your streams. And I like it just as calm background music too. But he gets paid for all of the minutes played, which means every time one of us streams, he's making money. And it's genius. It just makes me feel like I'm just he's a smart person and I am not. This is a really cool thing. Copy that link, put that in the chat in case you're interested in that Spotify artist. So yeah, it's all lo-fi, as we call it, or chill, is I guess what I call that kind of music. And I listen to music all day long. This morning I was listening to, last week I was listening to Jimmy Fallon's History of Rap. And this week I've been listening to Tool and a little bit of Soundgarden, because Seven Dust put out I love Seven Dust. Seven Dust is a heavy metal band that's been around for decades. I was listening to them in the 90s, and they came out with this new cool song. And that is a Soundgarden song, The Day I Tried to Live, and it's fantastic. And anyway, so I've been listening to that this week. All right, so the vote is in. Let's see what we got. See what we got in chat. Oh my, we got a lot of Mac. Mac, Linux, Linux, Mac, 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 Linux, Mac, 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 Windows, Linux, Mac, Mac, Mac. So I've learned where my fan base is at. I'm changing the Linux. No one else wants Windows. Well, really, the thing is on Linux, on Windows, most of it's going to be Linux stuff because we're going to be doing it in Linux. Anton, no, the only way to use a GUI app that I know of in a container is through the X11 forwarding. That's the only way I know how. So to answer that question. Sad Linux noises. Windows, Linux, Linux. I think Mac wins. Yeah, so Windows sadly is third, which I will say that basically go get Windows Terminal on Windows, and then you go into its settings, and it automatically, for each one of your things, it'll automatically create a separate shell that you can launch from each one of these, and then go into settings, which is just a file, and it'll open in my Visual Studio Code. And then you can customize with all the same things we're doing now. So the fonts, the commands that it runs, all the, the colors, all those things are, inside of that. And so that's really, to me, that's like, now that you've done that, then we can go back to Mac. Because a lot of these things are going to be the same. And that is not Mac, that is Linux. All right, so the first thing we got to do, all right, we're starting here on Mac. Mac. All right. It's like people came in at the end with Windows because there was too many Mac people. So we got to launch Terminal. Question is, yeah. Keyboard shortcuts work inside. So I got to launch Terminal to do some things. So the first thing is, you want to go in, if you're not on a brand new Mac, like I am in this case, you want to go in your preferences, and you want to see what your shell is going to be. So you want to go into users and groups. Inside, all right, did it change? Did it change my shell? Okay, so there used to be, oh, maybe we need to authenticate. No, this is not my normal password. It is not that short. It's just a test system. So you used to be able to change all that stuff here. So they've already taken it out. Now I don't know where to change it other than in the standard Linux setup interface. So now we got to go Google that. So the default shell will change, and so if you're on Catalina and you get into a shell, and I know I'm on ZSH because it says it right at the top here actually, but the shell might change on you, and if it doesn't, Mac will often warn you and say, hey, you're using Bash, the default shell is now ZSH. So basically get on the ZSH, because the ZSH that's in Mac now, if you're on the latest Mac, is pretty new. It's 5.7. It used to be like 5.2. Oh, you're saying right click on the user? No, I got nothing. Yeah, there's no right click. Nothing there. It's weird. Yeah, so anyway, go look up instructions if you need to change it, because it may just change it the same way you change. Yeah, so you can do change sh. So you change in the shell, basically back to that, right? So that's this command here. So you can change the shells back and forth, and that's your default shell. But then once you get into ZSH, or into ZSH, yeah, then you're good, right? So we can, next thing we need to do is go get iTerm, and then we'll stop using terminal. Download, recommend donating. I'm a fan of donating to all open source that you use, especially if you're using it daily. Just give them a couple of bucks one time. It's amazing how hundreds of thousands of people just giving a couple of bucks can make all the difference for someone doing it. All right, so it's downloaded iTerm into my downloads. Normally, I would drag it over here to applications. It will go into my applications. That way I can do iTerm. Then we can close terminal. And yes, I downloaded it from the internet, and I am sure. I'm going to allow notifications. And there we go. So I'm going to... Well, actually, I don't want to full screen that here. We're going to maximize. Let's zoom in so we can all see. Now, for me, I would bring in my dot files at this point. And, yeah, I didn't get the advanced options. They could, you know, maybe that's weird. I don't know why that happened. I don't know. I mean, the thing is, this is a stock system, so it's not an upgrade. Maybe I have to authenticate again. There we go. So I have to authenticate first, and then I can right-click. That is not intuitive at all. So yes, thank you, Paul, and everybody else that was trying to explain to me. Open the lock first, Enrique. Yeah. Yeah, thanks to all of you being persistent on that. So, yeah, so then in here you can change your shell, right? And that will just ensure that you are consistently using the same one. So now that I'm in iTerm, normally I would have a dot files, and I'm not going to make this about dot files because that is optional, and it doesn't make your terminal any better. It just helps you control your settings, store them in one place, and then optionally put those up on the internet for you to sync across machines. My challenge is I'm on Mac and Linux, and sometimes Windows, and so keeping those scripts and those dot files working across OSs is kind of a nightmare. I spend too much time doing that, and I have branches now at this point, like a branch for Linux and a branch for Mac, but I really would love to keep it all in one. It requires a lot of work on dot files, so we're going to skip that because they won't make this any better. It'll just make it more maintainable across multiple machines. So now we need to do oh-my-zsh. Now you'll notice that my zsh prompt is default. Oh, stop that. Let's get rid of that. Remove that. I don't want that anymore. All right, so we're gonna put my terminal down here. So in here, I have nothing installed, so I could do, like you notice how I don't even have command completion. So I have the curl command on my Mac by default. I don't think I have git. Yeah. I'm not. Well, you're gonna need this eventually, but we're gonna opt out of that for now. We're gonna need that. We're gonna need those developer tools. So, you know, if I type curl and I type tab, like there's nothing installed. It's just a pure shell. So command completion is one of those things we gotta get working. And one of the ways that we do that is with oh-my-zsh. I'm gonna go over my oh-my-zsh. I'm going to copy that. Now, since I already have curl installed on my Mac, this is gonna work. We hope. And then it's going to say, oop, I can't get because I don't have developer tools, which install some of those things. Now, most of you are going to have developer tools from Apple already on your machine. Or if you have installed Xcode, Xcode comes with it. But in this case, we're just installing the developer tools. It will take a few minutes. Any idea how to run transparent screen on full screen mode of iTerm? So by default, iTerm does not do, when you do full screen. So for me, it's Command U. Let's see if that works. Command U. Yeah, it's not showing me. So when you're on full screen, it defaults to not giving you transparent because it assumes that you don't want to see the background. So you're going to have to go into, yeah, it's not going to work. Preferences. And under profiles, actually, let's go to let's just go and do. Yeah. Disable transparency for full screen windows by default. So that's not checked. And so use transparency and then oops. Under my profile, I only have one. Under my, let's see, colors. Transparency, so that's part of it. So let's do that, right? So then when I go full screen, it does that. And then if I do a Command U, it still doesn't do it. Yeah, and it's not doing it. I'm not sure why. Maybe that's a bug. But I don't. The transparency on full screen to me doesn't make sense. What does make sense is maybe you want some cool background, and so you can enable the background, which allows you to go find a picture, which I have none because this is a brand new machine. There's not even backgrounds, but you can put a background. So when you have that, that you can fade the background in or whatever. But let's keep it right there. Anyway, good question. I'm not sure why that's not working. It works for me on my regular Mac, but I'm not sure why it's not working on this new Mac. All right, so now we should install that again, and is my Git? Oh, still not installed. Still not installed. Ah, so slow. So slow. This is time for a coffee break, and. Also, did you know I'm on Patreon and you can support this channel and my podcast, which I just launched a new episode yesterday. You can go to podcast.brettfisher.com. Do I have any podcast listeners here in the audience that have actually heard this thing? So you can come over here to podcast.brettfisher.com and you can choose to subscribe in all of the favorite players. And we just launched the latest episode. Sorry, I've been a little slow on the episodes lately. I had a lot going on this summer. So my favorite thing about Containerd is that it means I get to talk to my friend Phil Estes, and we did a hour-long conversation about all the stuff Containerd and all those projects related to container runtimes. So that you can check out that over on my podcast. It seems that your VMs are working faster than on my workstation with new AMD Ryzen 16 CPU cores and pretty fast SSD. What type of Mac PC are you using? I am using a 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro with all the top stuff. So I just got this new machine. So that's my machine. And this is using Parallels, which is awesome. Parallels is very fast. That's a Mac running in Parallels on top of this machine. So 32 gig of RAM, 8 i9 cores, but of course they're going to be thermally throttled all the time because it's Mac. Someday I'd love to be able to have the Mac desktop. That thing is a beast, the Mac Pro, but it's a little bit on my budget. So this thing is almost as expensive, but I lease them now, so I only have to pay rent on my MacBooks. If you have a business, if you didn't know this, if you have a business, you can go to the Mac store and you can buy all the Apple stuff on a lease program. So you only have to pay a little bit per month, like a car payment. So, yeah. Oh, and on Spotify too, yes. So my podcast is on Spotify. Oops, wrong one. Yep, Spotify too. Hello. Do I plan to get a Mac with ARM CPU? I don't know. I'm not going to do it right up front. I am going to let the first one come out and see what happens. I can tell you that, as a developer, as a DevOps person, like my world is on x86. I don't run ARM servers. I don't run ARM VMs. Raspberry Pis are super cool, but I don't work on IoT a lot. The world runs on Intel and AMD. Like basically when I say Intel, I mean x86 compatible. So I love the idea. Okay, I was a huge fan of that tiny little MacBook that was like a 10-inch or 11-inch thing that they had because it had no fans, right? And I love the iPad, but the iPad isn't a Mac OS, and I need as much fun as I have with an iPad, it cannot replace a desktop for me. So I need a desktop OS, and so I'm imagining this future where maybe we can get the Apple Silicon, where it's fanless MacBook Pros that have like similar performance to MacBook Pros that we have now, but there's no fans in them. Like how amazing would that be? But we need to wait a while. Like we need ARM Windows needs to be, it is a thing. ARM Windows is a thing now. ARM Linux is a thing. But we need all those to become more mature and have all the packages built for them. I think this is like a 5-year cycle. Like 5 years from now, like running ARM on most things will just be normal. And because, you know, Apple isn't the only game in town. Windows Surface ARM, isn't that, what's that thing called? Yeah, the RT Surface, right? Wherever that's at. Is it called? No, that's not it. Yeah. So anyway, there's the Windows 10 ARM, which the problem right now is compatibility, right? Like apps don't work on it. So on Windows, that's the same problem. I think it's going to be the same thing. Like I've got a lot of Mac apps that aren't getting updated anymore. Like, you know, there's a lot of stuff that all has to become compatible. So I think it's going to take at least a few years before. But yeah, I'm interested. I long for the future with longer battery life, no more fans, better controlled thermal processing. Like that's the future, I think, for sure. It's like 2 hours, Brett. You've had practice on long streams at DockerCon. Yeah, like 7 hours is fine. So I can do this. All right, back to oh-my-zsh is installed. So now you will notice that when I'm in a new terminal, I already have this default theme. This is the default oh-my-zsh theme. And it comes with that out of the box. So cool, at least we've got a theme. But if I do Vim is now the next thing, because the first thing I want to do is I'm going to want to get a fancier Vim. But the problem is I don't have Bru. And on Mac, and now increasingly on Linux, you need a better installer. So I'm going to install Homebrew on my Mac. All right, and that's going to do that. And then we're going to install NeoVim, because NeoVim is my favorite Vim. And then on top of that, we're going to install SpaceVim. If we go back to my list, I'm basically working from the top down. So we got terminal emulator, done. Color theme, actually we haven't done that. But the color theme should go down the list. The shell, next thing, done. ZSH configuration manager, done. Shell editor, we're working on that right now. So almost finished. Could you recommend plugins to integrate VS Code with Git? So my VS Code has like three Git plugins. Let's look over it. Let's look at it. I've got source control, which is built in. And then I've got GitHub, or no, this is GitLens. Sorry, this is GitLens. GitLens, I think, is the most popular in terms of the add-ons, based on the store. And then this is GitHub. I wish this. Let's go to this. I customize. Go to my extensions. I need the GitHub to look like GitHub because it's too confusing. Can I change the GitHub logo? let's go to settings. GitHub. No, I don't see it. So I thought the GitHub logo used to be there, but the problem is it's so confusing between, this looks like a pull request, I guess, or this is a merge, this is a branch, and this is some, branch with a circle. So they don't mean anything to me. So the problem is switching between all of them, right? Like I can see issues and PRs in the GitHub one. The built-in one works just fine, but GitLens is the thing I've been trying out this year. So, yeah. Yeah, ARM is still pretty tough. Yeah, and I think Apple and Windows, like creating their OS to work on ARM and creating hardware that is running ARM is awesome, and that is going to that is a fantastic future for ARM in terms of compatibility. Because when the only thing we had to do in terms of hobbyists and people on their desk is to support running things like Raspberry Pis, that was always going to be a very niche market. But the minute that now your programs need to be built for the Mac binary has to run on ARM, and the Windows binary has to run on ARM, that's going to mean a lot of stuff's going to happen. But it's going to take time, so I think it's going to be years. He had to go walk the dog. Yeah, so my dog is I can hear that he's been walked in the background. My wife is taking care of that, so the dog also has to go to the bathroom. And I probably need to take a break too. But first, we're going to do Bru install NeoVim. Yeah, and I've been playing around with the volume, so I have this thing called Audio Hijack, and this is my audio setup for the live show. And I have this ducker. It ducks. I can turn the volume of the music up, but it ducks it down when I'm talking. So that's how that works. And then it also lets me play sounds. Right? Actually, I think I want this to be over here. Yeah. So it's a pretty fun app from Mac called Audio Hijack. So it allows me to make really custom routes of my audio setup using all sorts of interesting things. I can put in graphic equalizers. I can put in noise gates, all sorts of really cool stuff in there. All right, NeoVim. Now, if I do Vim, Vim still opens up the original Vim, right? So in Vim, I believe, is the shortcut for NeoVim. So you notice it says in Vim there. So I would normally create an alias, right, of just Vim, like that. That way, I'm always opening up NeoVim. All right, so let's do space Vim. So you'll notice that NeoVim is nice. And not to confuse it for you all, I'm just going to actually start. I'm going to keep typing in Vim. So NeoVim is nice, but it's still the default setup, right? I can't do anything with a file browser. I don't have a lot of the shortcuts that are handy. Everything's stock Vim setup. So what I'm going to do on top of that is simply install space Vim. And they have a quick start guide. And then it's going to do curl shell script. Always make sure if you're going to trust something from the internet that it's over HTTPS if you're going to ever pipe something into a shell for security reasons. You want to trust them. So if I was on a real production system, I might just go look at that install SH first, just to make sure that it's not doing anything nefarious. Let's see. Oh, okay. So this is saying install space vim for vim and neovim. Do this. So I'm going to do that. It's basically downloading a bunch of Vim default settings. It's also installing some new fonts, which I actually didn't know it actually installed the fonts for me automatically, but that's cool. It gives you some defaults, and you can always change those later. And then it sets up your default vimrc to run all of these add-ons, so that basically space vim is how you manage all of your settings and default features in Vim. All right, now if I do a vim or an invim, then it'll give you, I'm gonna turn off transparency because that can be a little hard to read. All right, so you have a choice here at the beginning. It's basic mode or dark powered mode. It basically is like for a beginner in Vim, basic mode is great. I choose the dark powered mode because it has a little bit more advanced search and some other things. And you'll notice right away some of my problems already. So my fonts, right? My font here is messed up. See all those question marks? And you see down at the bottom on my line here that it's just sort of boxy. And if you look at my host Vim, oops. If you go over here, right, you'll see that, like, let me just do a default one. You notice that I've got like little arrows on the right, and down at the bottom I've got this is actually a fire logo down there, and you'll see that I have all these file icons down here on the bottom left where there's like the widget, and yeah, so all that stuff is a part of your font, which is not super obvious when you're in a shell that's actually a font character. So we need to change, and the reason that's a problem is we need to change that font inside of iTerm. So if we go into preferences for iTerm, into our profile, and we look in the fonts. All right, so it looks like none of the new fonts. You can also, by the way, open up the font book in Mac. Look at all your fonts. And let's just search nerd. Okay, so there's no nerd fonts there, and there's a lot of good ones. If you looked at mine over here, I have actually on my host machine. In fact, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do font book. So on my Mac, if I just search for nerd, you can see that I've got a number of fonts. It's a little small to read there, but you'll see that I have Deja Vu, Anonymice, Droid Sans. So like there's an open source one called Droid, Hack, Pro Font, Source Code Pro, which there is one called Source Code Pro from Adobe. And it's a great font for source code. And then because they own the name, but it's open source, you can't make your own off of that font and call it Source Code Pro. So when someone renamed it, when they extended it and added the nerd fonts to it, they called it Sauce Code Pro. So it's hard to say. There's an Ubuntu font, and all of those have the nerd font stuff. So they come from Nerd Font. And so you can download those with Bru. So let's do the Sauce Code Pro. Let's do that one. So I want to exit here and Bru. So with Bru Fonts, I could install all of these, which is crazy. I would not do that. Let's see if I can find the tab for. Okay, here we go. I need to tap the fonts keg. So what you're doing here is your brew tap homebrew cast fonts. So now I'm going to be able to install fonts. A tool for developing GitHub Actions locally would be awesome. I'm curious, Tommy, what would that tool be? Just because it's a YAML file, if I remember correctly, YAML, that goes in that .github directory. Would it be simply that it's checking syntax, maybe? Because I'm actually surprised that doesn't already exist. Like, it seems kind of. It's one of those things where, like, that's a great idea. Certainly someone has thought of that already. Extensions. Yeah, so GitHub Action, like there's already language support, schema validation. Look at all those. Yeah. Tons of them. Tons of them. Looks like the GitHub default one might. No, it doesn't have anything to do with GitHub Actions. Okay. That's not even the default one. That's not even the real one. Anyway, back to this. All right, so now we've got fonts. Let's do a brew cask search sauce. See what we find. Installing something? What are we doing here? The security use packages from Bru. Do they have any kind of security control? Probably not. I mean, it's kind of like most open source. It's a great question, but you are essentially downloading a tool from the internet. Now, it's all open source. It's all on GitHub. So you can go over and look at a package in Homebrew and see what exactly it's doing. So you could do like Homebrew NeoVim. Then you can look at the formula. The formula is how it's installed. And so when you type that command, you would see, let's see. Nope, that's Travis. Where is it at? Where is the formula? Doesn't seem to be the formula. Oh, this is on an old one. This is the wrong one. There we go. So yeah, so it's going to be installing all these dependencies. There's a lot of stuff going on there. This is basically the instructions, right? So if you really cared, you can see the SHAs of particular files it's downloading. By default with Bru, it installs precompiled binaries for your distribution, your OS essentially. So in this case, on Mac, it's going to download Catalina if I'm on Catalina, Mojave, High Sierra. So you at least are getting like SHAs and things that are installing over HTTPS, so you don't have to worry so much about like man in the middle or someone injecting a different install. But are these things scanned for viruses or malicious code? Like probably not. That's such just like, to me, that's the nature of open source. You've got to trust the Homebrew, just like you got to trust NPM, right? The NPM founders for when you install the NPM stuff. But that's a great question, a great discussion. But I don't have any more information than that. Does NeoVim plus SpaceVim make you feel like you're back to banging the rocks together if you have to work on plain Vim? Well, I almost never no. Well, maybe, but okay. So let me answer that in a more broader context. I use Vim on a server so rarely because now that we have all these infrastructure as code tools and we have kube control and Docker and Terraform and all these things, I don't find myself editing things on a server anymore. What I find myself doing is editing it on my machine or I have my own personal Ubuntu server. I use that for my iPad. And so all my tools are there, right? My NeoVims, my SpaceVims. So it's so rare that I ever open up Vim on a plain old server somewhere on the internet, because I'm normally committing things to Git, and then so I'm editing it locally, putting it in Git, and then the tools are taking that and doing something with it for me, whether it's Terraform Cloud or some GitHub Actions or Circle CI or whatever you have, right? So in my workflows and in my clients and even my courses, all my course slides, if you just go to slides.kubernetesmastery.com, right? So these are the slides for my course that you can buy my course, or you can just look at the slides for free. And those slides are built, you can actually hover down at the bottom, and it will take you to the Git repo of that particular markdown file that makes that slide. So I'm using that slide I'm editing that slide in Space Vim with NeoVim on my local machine, or on my iMac, or my iPad with Ubuntu, That's how I'm doing that. So the answer is yes. If I had to use Vim all day long without my personal Vim, it would suck. That's what I used to use dot files for. Like, I would have a generic dot files that I don't think I even have anymore, that was just for like normal Vim. It didn't do Space Vim or anything special. And it allowed me to quickly copy a file into a server and then have a Vim setup that was usable. But I don't do that on normal servers anymore, because that's basically back when we didn't have all these infrastructure as code tools. So like a decade ago. So anyway, what do we see here? I'm not. So Bru search sauce. Everything is safer than snaps. Hello. How do you make slides from Markdown? So there is Remark. Slides from Markdown. There's two competing formats. There's Remark. Put that in chat. And that will take simple in-browser Markdown-driven slideshow tool targeted at people who know their way around HTML and CSS. And then they have actually a on-the-fly thing called Remarkize. I don't know what that is. There's another one. Markdown presentation ecosystem. I don't know about that. Oh, Reveal. So Reveal is the other one. And I'll put that one in there as well. So both of those are ways to write Markdown, and then basically you're applying CSS and HTML formatting. Check this one out. I don't know what this is about. Marp. All right, so Bru install Bru cask. All right, so we're doing the Sauce Code Pro Nerd font. Well, that seems to be taking a while. Quit the font book, in case that's a reason. Then in iTerm, once you have that font installed, you should see your fonts. Still don't see it. All right, I'm going to Control C and try that again. So the nice thing about this is that it's installing it as a user font, not as a system font. So I don't have to have admin privileges to do it if I'm doing it as Bru. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. There we go. Boom. Now if I went over to my font book and I searched, if I went under user fonts, yeah, so you would see I have two fonts now, monospaced and then normal. So normally you'd want monospaced. And then over an iTerm, let me do your text. I have to restart maybe. Let's restart. Let's restart iTerm. And all right, under preferences. There we go. All right, I think I'm choosing the ooh, look at that. Use built-in powerline glyphs. Yeah, glyphs. Yep. Use subpixel. Sure. Yeah, that's all. Okay, that sounds like a bad idea. Never mind. So built-in powerline glyphs. I'm trying to remember. I think that what that is that's for any custom thing that iTerm does. So if you're an iTerm person on Mac, you probably, looks like I have a permissions complaint. So I'm gonna run this. I have a permissions directory problem. There we go. All right. I'm going to turn off the transparency. All right, so now what do we have? We have a shell that is, by the way, with iTerm, there's a step here that you'll want later on that is, you can do the default terminal as like iTerm to the default terminal, and then install shell integration. So this adds some bonuses. Run this. Basically, this allows iTerm to be do a little bit more things in your terminal. And it also has things that can actually run on remote machines that allow you to do some fancy stuff, such as when on my local machine, this little bar up at the top, it's pulling environment variables out of my shell and doing cool things in this little status bar up at the top, like what is my Docker context, what is my Kubernetes context, and for that you need the iTerm. Basically, you need to have the shell integration running at startup time there. So, and you can see there, it has some utilities like IT2 engine. Oh, I spell it right. I don't actually know these tools, but did it not actually install? I don't know, my scroller is not working in this thing. Next time you log in, the next time. Okay, so like ImageCat is something really cool that I like. So for example, here's a utility that it comes with. This is super cool. So ImageCat, desktop. So if I want to see an image, so like ImageCat, you can do a URL, or I can do something like, where is that? We'll actually it'll put the image in your shell. So anyway, that's kind of a neat thing. Those are utilities that come with iTerm, but you have to install them with the iTerm shell integration down here. right? So that was optional. All right, so now we have the font installed. Let's go look at Vim. Let's see if it picked up automatically in Vim. And look at that. So it's already installing some new things in Vim. I don't know if those are related, but you can see now in my bottom bar that I have arrows, which before I had lines, and at least now I have arrows. If I zoom out a little bit, it might... Well, that's not what I want. Font. Do not want to adjust the window when adjusting font size. And I want to keep transparency off. All right. So now, open up Vim again. All right. So we've got arrows over on the right. We've got arrows down at the bottom. So part of our nerd font is working, right? So we know that I had to get iTerm2 to get a font with all those extra things in it. And so let's actually go into downloads or documents. I'll just go in here. Yes. And all right, so I'm going to Vim this file, and you'll notice little things like up at the very top. It's kind of hard to see, but up at the very top, there's actually a little logo that means Markdown up there, and you'll see like a little logo down at the bottom with the Apple, meaning I'm on. It's running in Apple mode, basically for I think it's for line feed and the compatibility of the file kind of thing. And those are all a part of the font, so we needed that nerd font to do that. Then one of the things you get because of Space Vim is you get all these extra features in there, such as things like, automatic syntax highlighting for whatever you're doing, right? So because it knows it's a Markdown file, do that little logo up there that indicates it knows it's a Markdown. Then, right, and then. Right, so you can see that it's properly formatting my Markdown, right? So and you can do the same thing, and it has all this stuff. If you hit just the space bar inside, you hit just the space bar, you get actually this helper, which is a fantastic feature of Space Vim. If you're not really sure what Vim commands to do, what keyboard shortcuts do what, just hit escape to get out of the insert mode, so you get back into normal mode in Vim, and then you hit the space bar, and it gives you this menu system. So now I want to show the file browser. So let me hit the F key. You can see that over here on the right. So I hit F, and then it changes to show me what subcommands. So if I wanted to display the file tree, I would hit T for toggle file tree, and then it gives me an error. Vimproc DLL is not found. Please read help Vimproc to make it. Create asynchronous execution library for Vim. It is a fork of ProcVim. I added some features and first download. so these are some extra steps. That I don't think I've ever had to do this. If I've done this, it's been so long, I've never even heard of this. Anyway, so now I have on my right, my file browser, right? And then I can do space FT to make it go away. And then I'm going to quit. Oh, I didn't write. There we go. So that's Space Vim. We got our fonts in there, and you'll notice like if I do Vim again, it'll, for some reason it's not remembering my last file used, but there it is. So you see there's a little logo next to the Brett on that. So that's another indication that my Space Vim is working well. Now, if you want to customize Space Vim, the first thing you would want to do is under here, you could go Vim RC. Sorry, Vim RC. actually, I am completely wrong. What am I talking about? I'm talking about my ZSH. I want to customize my ZSH. So ZSHRC to get all that custom stuff in my command prompt. So you can see that Robbie Russell is the default theme, but I can go, there are many other themes. You can even do random themes inside your shell. You can, but this is all in that vim.rc file. And I have on my machine a lot, I mean, it's taken me years and years, but a lot of other settings that I've customized here. And the plugins, right? This is the big things. So this is the plugins. And if you go look, in, ooh, that's a tiny ZSH. So if I go into plugins, is it plugins? Yeah. You can see all these crazy amount of plugins, right? Oops, no. What am I doing? So you can see like there's just a ton of these things. Does give me color? Doesn't. All right, so anyway, you go through here and you just find like all the things that you use in your environment, and then you add those from that plugins directory into this list. So I know I use Docker, you know, Docker Compose, Kube Control, GitHub. I just know that these are all there. And then, you know, that way, it will autocomplete. See, I don't even have Docker installed, but it's already starting to autocomplete things because I've installed those plugins that I have some of the autocompletion stuff built in. And that's really how, and then so the real big two things on oh-my-zsh is plugins, and you can find the list, and then all the way at the top is your theme. And so if you want to go get themes, you go over to themes. I'm struggling with making Powerline fonts work inside VS Code terminal. Yeah, and that's why I have never been a VS Code terminal person. I've never stuck with it. I mean, I don't actually know if it works, but you know, I have always just enjoyed a dedicated app for the thing that I'm doing. So like I think iTerm is superior to VS Code's terminal just because it's the thing I've always used, and I don't want my terminal, you know, to me, I'm not always in VS Code, so I don't want to really run and learn the command shortcuts for two different terminal things. So the only time I ever run terminal is when I'm maybe debugging something that I need to run inside the context of that project, and it's just easier to do that. But let me see if mine works, if it just works out of the box. So yeah, see, mine's broken too. Powerline's not working in there. And so that's the kind of thing that I'm just not wanting to fiddle with because, you know, I usually have the output or the debug open already here. And granted, if you learn the shortcuts, it's probably faster to get to the terminal in here. But for me, you know, just alt-tabbing right over to my terminal is, you know, that's me. I'm sticking with the dedicated terminal. I've tried many times to get used to the terminal inside of other things, and I just can't. All right, so let's do a custom theme in here. By the way, one of my favorite custom themes is, let's see if it's in this list. It's super cute and colorful. I sometimes do it almost like to troll, when I'm on. Shoot. All right, I'm gonna go find it. So let's see. LL. oh-my-zsh custom themes. Wild Cherry. All right. So this thing is fantastic. Fairy tale inspired theme. I mean, what's more perfect? What's more perfect? Oh, so you got to set the fonts for the VS Code terminal to the nerd fonts. Huh. I didn't even know there was a font for the terminal. But okay. I believe you. Is there a way to add auto-completion and syntax check with error highlighting to space vim? For example, Docker files, compose files. So yes, but that's the thing about Vim, right? Is that everything has its own utility. So in Vim, right? So I've already got syntax highlighting for so many things. If I leave here, well, let's Vim it so I can actually do something. Right? So it's already got the syntax highlighting. I didn't do anything with space vim, so it syntax highlights that thing. And in order to do, let's see, it's already doing, well, it's not doing command completion, autocomplete, or I think if, so with Docker files, one of the things that you would probably need to do is there's a Docker file linter. Actually, I think I already had a shortcut to one. Yeah, the Hadoop lint. Or so you would need to install this. And yeah, and then somehow integrate it into Vim as an option. So let's see if I can find that real quick. Yeah. Anyway, it's possible. There are some of the language interpreters in SpaceVim that will do that, like JavaScript. Some of those might have some of that, but yeah, you would need to get a specific linter, and then basically, like for shell check is, I think, an add-on. Let's see, what do I need to do? I need to already in there over here. No, okay. Right. So I think one in here is shell check. I'm sorry. I need to do space vim. So in here you would need, this is, by the way, this is the init.toml for SpaceVim. When you go read in the SpaceVim documentation, init.toml is the way that you customize everything in Vim. So Groovebox is a default color scheme. By the way, I did not set the color scheme inside my terminal. So if I want this to match this look, then what I need to do in iTerm, is something we should have done earlier, is inside of my profile under colors, I want to change these presets, right? But I need to import one, and I like everything Groovebox. I used to use, there was other ones I used, but years ago I settled on Groovebox. I don't know what's going on with my Safari. So Groovebox, Gruvbox. I'll put that in chat. And it has the theme colors. It has light and dark. That's why I really like it, is because the palette, there's light mode, dark mode. There's contrast options. We can do hard, medium, soft contrast. So it's very professional. It's very well it's got all the features essentially. And then, so if you go and you find iTerm, so I need to do Groovebox iTerm. In fact, if you go, there's Groovebox contrib, and then I have to go find iTerm specifically, iTerm 2, and then if I want the dark colors, right? So I can just actually, what's that extension? iTerm, like, yeah, iTerm colors. Work? I don't know if that works. Let's try it. All right, so I have to do import colors. And that won't work. That won't work. That's not how I do it. That was dumb. Yeah, because that takes me to a web page. Let's do raw. Save as. Then inside my iTerm, import. What? What? No stinking archive? Why, Safari? Why? I could just paste it here. We're over here. Yep. Oh. Clipboard. Wrong clipboard. It really shouldn't be this hard. All right. I'm sure I could wget it and all those things. Thank you for the suggestions. Just really want to get it imported. All right, so now that should be set. So you notice this is black. Wait. Didn't change. What? Right, because I didn't set it. I imported it. Dummy. So Groovebox dark. There we go. So now my Vim matches my terminal, right? And on my Mac, I have set up a really wonky way. You can just kind of Google this on my Mac. I set up some iTerm settings with environment variables in order to auto-change my shell when I launch a new shell based on the automatic light-dark of Mac. You know, like when you can set Mac to go light or dark. Based on the time of day. And I just had to Google around and follow the directions on setting up some environment variables for basically it detects in the background through the plist whether the Mac is in dark or light mode when it creates the shell, and then it will change that shell. So yeah, I don't remember how to do that, and it's a hack, and it was not pretty, and I'm not proud of it. But, all right. So I feel like we're getting close. When we go back to that list, we've got The color theme, done. So the group box is the default inside of my NeoVim with Space Vim. So that's done, and I changed it inside of iTerm. We've got our font, we've got our shell, we've got our Vim distribution. We've installed the Source Code Pro. We've now a true color and italics, and this wild cherry theme. That was what we were going to do. But anyway, you can check out that wild cherry theme and change the theme if you'd like. But true color is a lot easier than it was like 5 years ago when I had to do it. There's actually a script to tell whether true color is enabled. And this basically goes through all the steps. If I print that out. All right, so yeah, so see there's a lack of true color support. I don't think that's what it's supposed to show me. Where's that one? Also, this is a good one. So basically, you've got to test your shell to see what colors it's supporting. All right. So when you see this on my screen and you see it a rainbow without a bunch of pixelated stuff, that means that your shell, your terminal emulator, and your shell are currently both supporting true color, so better than 256 color, which is necessary for a lot of stuff now. Like if you want to do more advanced stuff at the terminal, if you want Vim to be as pretty as possible, you have to have the true color first. And I'm just, I love color, so anything I can do to get away from 16 colors, then. So this setup used to take me hours to get right, but it just worked out of the box with the latest iTerm, with the latest NeoVim, with the latest Space Vim, with the all this stuff, and it just kind of works out of the box. Now you will find at times that you have to set it up differently in tmux or in SSH or whatever your shell is or your terminal emulator. If one of those two changes, or even your Vim build, if you do a different Vim, like if you're doing old Vim, not new Vim or NeoVim, like 8.0 Vim kind of, which is the newest Vim stuff. Yeah. Was Source Code Pro only font you needed? Yeah, because although it may not be what my Vim is using, but no, my Vim is using the terminal font. So yes, the answer is yes to that. It's the only one I had to install. Now, one of the cool things you can do, like you can see on my custom, let's see, my toml, let's see, space vim.d in here. So the status line separator, right? So the separator is that little thing down at the bottom in your, I get this question a lot, inside of Vim, the status line separator, so I'm going to comment this out because I'm going to change it to fire. And then if I go back in there, notice that it's a little squished, so I've got some spacing issues. Maybe that's because it's a mono font. And there's also, I believe, a way for me to use a different font for the status line, maybe? I don't know why that's... What does that do when I take that out? Yeah, nothing. I don't know what that does. So anyway, if I was using a different font, it might... I wasn't using the mono font. Let's see if I change the font to the non-mono. So yeah, you see how the fire logo is, it's more pronounced. Actually, I got rid of it over here on this one. So that's squished because it's a mono-sized font. So that character is only as big as any other character because they're all the same size. So if you're not someone who's particular, and if you don't care, I mean, if you haven't been used to mono-space fonts, then don't use them, and you'll get more. Fonts that are wider will be the font character that needs to be wider will be wider, like this with the fire. So yeah, the icons live in that nerd font. Now, everything nowadays is used to these super packed fonts, where they have all this extra stuff built into them. But iTerm actually has this setting that you don't. If you want to get around that, if you want to use a different font for what they call non-ASCII characters, so it has this option here where if I do this, then what I can do here is choose a regular font, like I can use that, and then I want my non-ASCII font to be that, and that's a way for me in iTerm. It's an iTerm specific thing. It's a way for me to use a different font that has all those special, not ligatures, but those special glyphs. That's a way for me to do that. So then my font looks different. So if I vim Docker file, yeah, all I want to do, I want to open read only. So you'll notice fonts are different, right? This one broke because I need to reload the window. But you'll notice over here the font is different, but the ligatures, or not the ligatures, sorry, the glyphs still work. And that's because whenever the application is asking iTerm for a special character that's not the standard ASCII characters, it will substitute in a different font. So it's basically allowing you, and the reason you would do this is if you want these special glyphs, but the font that you want to use as your standard terminal font doesn't have a nerd font. I don't have that problem because there's hundreds of nerd fonts. Like if we just go to the list of nerd fonts, it's kind of insane. Okay, that's not what it is. Where is the listy of nerd fonts? Patched fonts. So this is the list, right? It's like 75, maybe 50. There's no count here, but yeah, there's a lot, and they're all, and it's mostly, I mean, obviously this is focused around terminal stuff and shell stuff, so it's going to be stuff that's more programmer popular kind of stuff, like Fira code, Fira mono. A lot of these in Constola, these are all, even JetBrains has an open source font. So these are all fonts that people are used to for programming. The nice thing is you don't have to do that, but that feature is there as a backup plan if you need to do that. That's an iTerm thing. That's not going to work over. See, now if I exit and I go back, no. That still doesn't work. Oh, right, that one doesn't work because it was. I need to increase my default size of my font. I'm tired of zooming in. So now everything's back to working. I'm using the non-monospace font, and I'm just using a single font with the nerd font built in. So good question. You've been using Space Vim without that font for a year. Well, the nice thing is Space Vim scales, right? So it's not broken out of the box if you don't have a custom font. Because if you're SSHing into a machine, you often have to have that font on the machine. So like if I'm SSHing into an Ubuntu server, and I want to do fancy Vim on that server, I need those fonts on that server. So who wants to install a font on a server, right? So the nice thing is that it looks great out of the box, and that's to the credit of Space Vim. I'm sure that was not an accident. The learning path for basic K8's knowledge towards mastery in DevOps. So I'll take all my courses. I mean, that's going to be my first recommendation. After that, you're going to want to focus on CI/CD tools. I actually have Brett.show/ I think is it DevOps? Yeah, so here's a link. Here's a recommendation. Or him and shoe. That's how you pronounce it. Yeah, so that is Ask Me Anything I had, and I go through like what is DevOps really, like it's really not about tools, it's more about people and process, so you need to learn certain things. And then what tools you want to learn. And really at the end of the day, you want to learn one of everything. So learn one distribution of Kubernetes, learn one distribution of Linux, learn one cloud, learn one CI tool. It doesn't matter which one. Jenkins, Cloud CI, or Confluence. What am I trying to say? You need the CI tools. My brain went off on a tangent for a second. Doesn't really matter, because once you've learned a cloud and a Kubernetes distribution, and it doesn't matter what shell you have, Bash, ZSH, just learn one of them, and you will be so much better at learning all the other ones. I think a lot of people, when they first try, get distracted. They're like, oh, I want to learn this Linux, and then I want to learn that Linux, and I want to learn, multiple tools. I want to learn Azure and then Amazon. Just learn one of each. So I kind of have a list of, going down the order of things, and you just need to know one tool. Learn one scripting language. It can be Bash, it could be JavaScript, it could be TypeScript, it could be Go language. Basically a programming language that you can use for automation. And it doesn't matter which of them you learn, but learn one and then move on to the next tool. Because you're going to have tons of learning, and you're going to be learning the rest of your life. And I don't know all the languages, right? I've been doing this 25 years, don't know all the languages, but I do know one or two better than the rest. And then I make it up as I go along. So, a company for a job will be much more interested in you if you say, I know this Kubernetes distribution, and I know this cloud, and I know Terraform or whatever, Ansible. Just pick one of those. Don't do them all. Just pick one. And if you list those tools out, a good hiring manager will recognize that, one, you're good at learning. Like if you actually know those and you can prove it. And then two, if you've learned one cloud, you can learn another. If you've learned one scripting language, you can certainly learn another. If you've learned one distribution of Kubernetes, you can certainly learn another. But there's 80, 90, 100 distributions of Kubernetes. So there's not a lot of difference between Azure's Kubernetes and Amazon's Kubernetes. It's just the subtleties are there, but you don't need to do them all before you get a job. I would say focus on each tool at the layer, learn about storage in general, and then just learn one cloud storage and how that relates to containers and how you use that in a container. Don't learn all the different tools. Don't learn about storage replication like Ceph. Don't do that right away. You learn one way to do it, and then you move on. Because at the end of the day, if I can give you an app and I can say, pick your own cloud, pick your own tooling, pick your own scripting, pick your own type of Kubernetes, but I have a web app, and I want you in less than a day to automate the deployment of that on a cloud using Kubernetes. And you're not allowed, and it has to be done through Git. So I want to see all the changes to as things happen in Git, and I want to be able to save my code into a Git, and then it automatically somehow get deployed on that server, right? So I have some automation, which is very DevOps, right? You want automation in DevOps. So, and I want to know how it's tested. Like what testing engine are you going to use? You don't have to know a programming language to do that. You just have to pick Jenkins or Circle CI or CodeShip or whatever your CI tool is. Just pick one of those. And because that's the job of a person in DevOps often, is to work with a developer team that is already testing their code, and they need to figure out how to package it up, get it on the servers, and do that over and over and over again. And so if you understand at least one tool in every part, it doesn't really matter if I have to give you a different tool. You'll figure that out pretty quickly. That's a great question. Yeah. Yeah, and there's a roadmap thing called roadmap.sh.devops. It's much more in depth than I would ever really recommend. It seems very overwhelming to most people because it's got it's got all these languages. So, you know, it's going to say learn a programming language, just not all of them, just one. Understand different OS concepts. That's pretty cool. And so I love this graphic. If I were to make a course that took someone who didn't know computing at all, this would be like the approach. You may not have to learn things in this order, but yeah, it's pretty cool. Learning a cloud provider, right? I don't know what the purple versus green means. Personal recommendations versus alternate options. So the purple ones are personal recommendations. You know, but at the beginning of your world, you don't need to know I/O management. Like you probably can get away with not knowing that before you learn how a cloud works, right? So, but these are all things that over your lifetime career, you should be good at a lot of these things, right? Like you could go an entire career and never know FreeBSD, which is one of his personal recommendations or their personal recommendations. But anyway. All right, so I think I'm pretty much wrapped up here. I've got a fancy shell with a fancy Vim and a terminal. There's lots of other things I could do. We have still so much we could do. Enabling enabling italics is a thing that's actually a little tricky. Doesn't come out of the box. The reason I like italics is because it allows me to whenever I'm in Vim and I comment out code, it will be in italics. It's easier to read for comments. And then getting tmux up and running, I need to update that to use the oh-my-tmux. And then mosh for remote, if you want to do remote stuff. A Silver Searcher is also my best code tool, searching tool. So if you have a tool on your local machine for searching code, I think AG, that's the command for Silver Searcher. I think it's the best way to search files from the command line. I use bat now for most things when I want to display text at the command line. I don't use pcat anymore or pigmatize, so I could probably take that out. And then if you want to use a markdown viewer at the terminal, MDV is also a good one, but bat, I think really, that's really the best thing there. So, and I'm going to wrap this up. Been going 3 hours. We hit 3 hours. Woo! And all right, thanks everyone for joining. I will be live on Thursdays. Every Thursday, I try to be live. Sometimes I don't make it, but almost every Thursday. Follow me on Patreon to get updates. That's patreon.com/Brett Fisher. So go there. You don't have to become a member. You can simply just follow me. You scroll down, click the follow button. If you just want to get updates on all the things I'm creating and whenever I'm going live and when the podcast comes out and the newsletter and the courses and all of my other stuff. But if you feel like contributing a couple of dollars per month, I really appreciate it. There's some exclusive benefits at the higher levels. And thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. I will see you next week. Have a good weekend.